transplant obviously can, for many people, not everyone, but can lead to a huge wake up. And for me, it did sort of like, what is it? You know, before transplant, I had my bucket list. I was like doing my things. And after transplant, it's like every day is bonus.
Yeah.
I am fully confident I would not be here without that transplant.
Hello, my name is Niall McKay and welcome to Living with PSC, a podcast about the rare disease of primary sclerosing cholangitis. Now, PSC causes the bile ducts inside and outside the liver to become scarred, narrowed and eventually blocked, and leads to liver cirrhosis. In this podcast, we aim to dispel some of the myths about the disease. So, welcome, Monica Alderando. It's great to talk to you again. Last time we talked to you was about PSC Mommy, which is your fabulous podcast. But today we are talking about PSC Recurrence. How are you doing today, Monica?
Hi, thank you for having me again. It's such an honor to be here speaking as a patient and sharing my experience. Today I'm doing good. It's a good day and I will take it. 2 days ago, different story. 2 weeks ago, a different story. But today I'm doing really well. And excited to be here to talk to you. Yeah, last time we talked, I think I was 2 years out from transplant. I'm now 4 years out from transplant. And at that time, there was suspicion of recurrence. Officially, I believe they're still saying suspicion of recurrence, but I think it's pretty obvious that I'm headed in that direction as far as my symptoms. The itching has come back with a vengeance. I had my very first cholangitis episode, which I was strangely lucky to have not had that my first way around with PSC before I was transplanted. So I'm learning this new world of how to identify it within my own body. And yeah, that's where we're at right now.
I am sorry. The itching is just,
Awful.
It's just terrible. Yeah, the last time I came back from the hospital after I had a cholangitis episode, I was just so itchy, and I had to have all flannel sheets, and I couldn't wear certain clothes.
Yes.
I was doing hot cold showers. You know.
I now pick my socks in the morning, being like, "Oh nope, those are a little bit too tight, and I can't wear those anymore."
I know exactly. It's I'm so sorry. And the cholangitis, so you're getting high fevers and stuff like that as well, are you? Or
so in my case, my body doesn't seem to produce fevers unless I'm really in trouble. So I've been told to not use fever as an indicator, and I think that's fairly rare. But because of my immunosuppression from transplant, the one time I did get a fever, I was in pretty bad shape and already going into bacteremia. So I've been trying to figure out, what are the other signs and signals to look for to see if I'm in that space of needing to get treatment. And, during a pandemic, you think extra hard about going to the hospital. So lots of calls, lots of conversation with doctors about sort of what is this and should we worry? Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know in my case, I get a low temperature, not a high. I get a low temperature before I get a high temperature, So often it'll be skewing down below what is normal, and I'll get aches and pains,
Our bodies keep us on our toes since each one is so very different and complex, even within ourselves. It's been interesting to learn that recurrent PSC does not follow the same trajectory or path as your original PSC. So for me, this has been a really different experience from my first way around, which is also interesting because I feel like I'm learning anew and having different symptoms than I did the first time.
Well, I know in Irish culture, and I think also in Latino cultures, there's the trickster. The PSC is a bit of the trickster, isn't it? It's sort of
yes, it is.
kind of keeps changing faces and keeps changing. And in the recurrence thing, I mean, I just looked up something on the NCBI database, which was a recent report. And they said that, I mean, funny enough, I had heard that recurrence in PSC was about 30%. But this report says it's about 56% at 5 years. Have you heard any of those kind of statistics? Or
I have heard anywhere from 20 to 60, but most often 20%.
Yeah, because this is a 2017 long-term prognosis and reoccurrence of primary sclerosing cholangitis after liver transplantation. And trying to see where it came from. It seems to be a Japanese study, judging by the names. But yeah, because one of the things that I noticed was that when I started talking to people at PSC Partners, that many people who had been transplanted had recurrence.
What I would say in general for my experience, like it's hard to gauge, right, by who comes to support groups. So always when people are diagnosed with PSC for the first time, I say, we come to support spaces because we need support. Folks who are living their best lives are not necessarily seeking out the information that we need or want, when we're not feeling well. And I think that's the same. There was a time right after post-transplant where I found myself pulling away because recurrent PSC is the fear, right? That's the fear we all have. When I was diagnosed again, I came roaring back. If we use anecdotally, it may be that the folks who again need support are coming back into the fold.
I totally understand what you're saying. Yeah, it's kind of a self-selecting group. After you had your transplant, what were the things that started to alert you to the fact that you might be having recurrence?
It came up in my 2-year anniversary scans as a possible, as a maybe. And then I believe it was about 7 months later, I was hospitalized when I did have that episode of bacteremia. And, it's complex and it's not straightforward how or why those were connected. But since then, increasingly, especially in the last year, the itching, the fatigue, our familiar friends that PSC brings along. For me, it feels unfortunately familiar in that sense. So, it began in the testing and then escalated in symptoms.
And sorry, did you say bacteremia?
It's my understanding, and again, I'm not a medical professional, but my understanding it's sort of the similar to sepsis. So you have blood infection.
So it's a bacterial infection, essentially.
So it began in my liver and then extended out. It reached my bloodstream is how I understand what happened.
And where do you go? You live in the Bay Area. Do you have a local hospital that you go to that?
I have my local clinic, and then they consult with the transplant center in San Francisco. And I've been, if I need to, I go up straight to San Francisco. But if it's urgent, I have a nearby clinic. Us PSCers make decisions like, we will choose the house that's closest to the hospital, the local hospital. It was one of our deciding factors on where to live is we are literally a block away from our local clinic.
Oh, I know. And actually, I used to live very near where you live now in the Bay Area. I was just off the Edwards Avenue exit, sort of near Mills College there. But that's exactly what we're doing. We're actually moving from a place that's essentially a 2-hour drive to the hospital to like a 25-minute or 30-minute drive to the hospital.
Absolutely. And we're a fairly nomadic family. So now I do think about we have to be somewhere near a transplant center. That's part of the life factors now that we have to think about. As patients, I think we're very familiar with that kind of thinking. When we're moving jobs or moving cities, what does medical care look like? In the U.S., we have to think about what is insurance, which job offers the best insurance. because we know we'll need it, right?
I totally hear you about making these decisions, because I used to have a go bag in my house. I now have a go bag in my car. How are you dealing with the recurrence?
I think all of us patients can relate to this idea of trying to find some control, trying to figure out what works for us. Pre-transplant, I had a wonderful medical team in Boston, and my hepatologist was more than happy to kind of take some chances and let me try things. I did try phototherapy, which was an absolute pain, but I biked over to the center, and in their dermatology clinic, there was a phototherapy booth that is used for other skin conditions, and tried the UV therapy. I think there was some small chance that could help with the itching. At that point, my itching was absolutely out of control, and I would try anything. So 3 times a week, I biked over there. I, got in the little, very little garb they give you, walked in the booth for, I forget how long I would have to go, and did that 3 times a week for a few months. Unfortunately, it did not work. I've tried dietary changes. I've tried vancomycin both before, and now I'm trying it after. I unfortunately don't seem to be one of the lucky ones for whom it works. I think we all try to find that control, right? Trying to find a way. There has to be something that works. And everybody, as we said earlier, is complex, and different things will and won't work for different aspects of our disease. So, and for symptom management. So I know people for whom dietary changes have worked, others for whom it hasn't. And for me, I just had to, at some point, let go of that form of, I love food. I love having the social aspect of food, but not right now, obviously. But, I think post-transplant, my coordinators told me, like, you have a transplant to live your life. And sometimes, I don't take crazy risks or chances, but I've also kind of tried to find that balance of how to manage where I can and then let the rest go. I think it's really important to, also I've tried a lot of like stress management, which I think does help to some degree. I know that was helpful for me pre-transplant. But stress management is hard. I am very big in support spaces and finding community. So whether it be online or Zoom calls or touching base with 1 or 2 people you find through text, through calls. Hopefully, eventually we can have meetups in person. I really miss the conferences. I've made quite a few PSC friends here in the Bay Area through Zoom calls and through messaging. So I look forward to having a meetup afterwards, because I think that really does help. It really does help to have a space where when you say I'm itchy, people know what you mean.
Yeah.
They don't ask you if you've tried the latest lotion or if you've tried a certain thing. They just hear you. And for me, we talked a little bit earlier about just how important the therapy space is. Mm-hmm. One of the things that, especially as I approached transplant, was really critical for me to have someone who was not friends or family, with whom I could really discuss what I was feeling and thinking about my own mortality. And that's a really hard thing to hold with your friends and family, because inevitably it produces fear in them, right? And often the inclination is to comfort, console, be hopeful. And sometimes you just need someone to sit with you in the fear and to say things that are you're holding inside and be able to process them. So I'm a huge advocate for therapy and for trying different therapists. I've had several not so great experiences, and now have my system down for finding a new therapist, using tools in the States, in the US, like Psychology Today, and really thinking about the criteria that you use to select. And then I usually have about 3 to 5 candidates. I will call them, I'll have a phone interview, and then I'll see in person at least 3 people. Or I guess now it would be on Zoom or on the telehealth, but I'm really making sure that you connect with that person and are feeling like they're listening to you, and that the style of therapy, because there's so many styles of therapy I learned. I used to think, therapy was therapy. But there's so many schools of thought. There's so much methodology. There's people who mix different methods. For me, CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy, was really helpful right before transplant, really have some concrete activities. Different talk therapies have been helpful at different times. So, finding someone who connects with you, because for me, some of the biggest challenges have been around parenting.
Of course, yeah.
How to, the first time I was diagnosed with PSC, I didn't even know what was going on. It did not, other than the itching, it didn't really bother me that much for a very long time. So I didn't even know to be freaked out. That was not the case with recurrent PSC. I knew to be.
Yes.
I knew what was coming. It was very difficult. It really hit me very, very hard. And then being a mother of, a small child at that time, he was 3, kind of working through what that means. So a lot of, on the podcast and in the groups that I'm in, there is a lot of conversation, like, how do you talk to your children? How do you work through when you can't play with them? How do you work through, the days that you have to sleep or miss things, or you need to go into the hospital, right? And thankfully, I've had those conversations. So when things come up, I feel more equipped to be able to have that conversation with my 5-year-old.
When you get diagnosed at first with PSC, so you're like, okay, so how do I live with this illness? How do I continue my life as it always has been?
Yes.
And then I think gradually, you come to realize, I need to figure out how to be sick. I guess the transplant is a solution of sorts. You have a new disease to manage when you're transplanted. The gift of life is the gift of life. Nobody's complaining.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah.
I celebrate my bonus years with a lot of fervor, and I'm just so grateful. Another thing I remember that often I will do, as an artist, I use my photography a lot to process.
Yeah.
And when we think about how do we support our mental and emotional health, really trying to capture for myself. I mean, they're not often pictures that I share, but recording my own journey of like what it is to be a chronically ill mom, and how do I kind of capture that visually. And those images help me. They help me process, and sometimes they help me explain it to other people if I choose to share them. And also writing has been really helpful for me. Just, I don't know if you've heard of, I know you're also an artist, The Artist's Way, where she talks about,
of course, yeah.
just writing you write 3 pages of journaling. You just dump it all in there every day. I'm not great at keeping it up, but I have found that to be incredibly helpful, just to process and get all the ick out, those times where I'm just really feeling overwhelmed. That's also a super helpful process to.
The morning pages, those things can really be helpful. Yeah. And how do you find, like, is there, because I'm not aware of them, but there are support groups online. Are there PSC support groups?
Yeah. We, in our young women's group that's met up from the PSC conference, we're a pretty tight group. It's really a beautiful space. So there have been opportunities to really reach out to each other there, but also different centers right now have their support groups online. So again, I'm a nomad, so I've been seen at lots of centers. So I know both Mayo and Jacksonville, where I was transplanted, their support group is online right now, meeting on Zoom for post-transplantees, and also CPMC, California, Cal Pacific Medical Center. They have an autoimmune liver disease group that meets because I was a patient briefly there. I've connected to that group. So I believe many of the support groups that may have met in person at different centers are now online as well. So those groups have been really helpful. Mm-hmm.
Do you have a structure that you follow? Like, do you follow a particular thing, or is it how do you manage that when with people online, for example?
Different groups do it differently. Some are just open chat, ask questions, have a conversation. Some are, each person goes around kind of like if you were in a circle in a real space, they've kept that format. The going around, how are you doing, checking in. So I think it really depends on the group and the familiarity in the group and how many people are present. The important thing is holding space for who's present, right? And just feeling like, oh, there are other people who are having the same concerns, or there are people. What I love when people get connected and are able to help with questions or connecting with different professionals, or, oh, I found this person is really helpful at this center. Being able to answer those questions that really can't be answered anywhere else because no one else has that experience. And I know, obviously PSC Partners has Zoom calls. Unfortunately, the times that they've been at, I've not been able to attend. But I've definitely heard people talk about how helpful both the caregiver group and the PSCer group. And I believe there's a teen group as well that are all meeting on Zoom. So, one of the, there's been so much hard in the pandemic, but I feel like there's a different sense of connectedness that's been really beautiful for people. It doesn't matter where you are or if you can leave your house, all of a sudden we can get the support that was not really present before, or people didn't really know how to connect it this way. So in some ways that's a gift. I'm always hesitant to say the pandemic gave us gifts, but it's been something I've really appreciated, both in the PSC world and the artist world. I feel like that's happening a lot.
Well, I know when it happened, I was just like, oh, I don't want to leave the house anyway. I don't feel well. so great. Like I can just stay in and whatever. But then, of course, I didn't expect it to last a year. But there you go. We're still in it. And I think just to circle back on something that you said earlier on that I found very helpful was that it's very difficult for us to talk to the people who we love about our own mortality. Yes. And how important it is to find somebody to talk to about those things.
Absolutely. And, if folks haven't heard of like the I think it's called the ring theory, about kind of how to process out, whoever's most affected by the issue, they get to process out so that, please look it up. It's really hard to explain because it's visual. But sort of thinking about like, who do we process with? How does that happen? Who's helpful? We all know folks in our life for whom, when we've talked about the challenges of chronic illness, who are maybe not helpful. And it wasn't necessarily that they didn't want to be, but it can be challenging for them to hear us talk about our pain and our mortality and those things. So, finding those spaces where you can do that if you need to are really critical.
And it's called the circle theory, is it?
I believe so. So. I could get it to you.
Maybe we'll find a link, and we'll post it up with the podcast along
between
with this.
That and the spoon theory, those are my two helpful kind of visuals.
And what's the spoon theory?
The spoon theory is, I want to get the woman's name who wrote the story, but basically she was trying to explain to her friend what it felt like to be chronically ill and fatigued. And she talked about, she was at brunch with her, I believe, at a table, and she gathered up a bunch of spoons, and that she in particular, I believe, had lupus, but it applies to many autoimmune diseases that have fatigue. So she said, like, you wake up every day with a certain amount of spoons. And when you have chronic illness, it just takes that much more to do certain things, right? So it's going to take you, it might take you a certain number of spoons to take a shower or wash your hair or make breakfast. But you're always thinking about like this limited amount of spoons that you have. Whereas someone who's not sick, who doesn't have fatigue, unlimited spoons, right? You can just get spoons out of the air. But when you live with fatigue, that it's something you're constantly budgeting your energy. It's written by Christine Miserandino on the website, butyoudon'tlook.sick.com. You can find the full story.
What we'll do is we'll post some of those onto. We'll put the links together with the podcast.
Great, yeah. I mean, I think there are resources out there and sharing. Another one I recently heard about, which I haven't fully explored, but the idea of horizontal parenting. Apparently there's like all kinds of activities and lists of things you can do with your kids lying down. And I'm like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. So, this idea, what we were talking about earlier of just how do you live within the constraints that you have, right? How do you make it work? Because there comes a point where you just can't change it. Like I can't in the moment that my son is really upset, and rightfully so, right? Having big 5-year-old feelings because he can't play tag. How do I offer another choice that I can do?
I admire you hugely because it's such a journey we have to go through. And I suppose one of the things that happens is that we just become more comfortable with ourselves and what's going on with ourselves, but I greatly admire it because you seem very comfortable with yourself, and that's a huge achievement,
It's very kind of you.
Yeah.
A lot of work, a lot of therapy, a lot of just having to figure out how to be in this world, right? Like we're here and we don't always know why we're here. And part of me feels like, okay, I had this, right? I had PSC. It taught me a lot. I was a huge, type A overachiever, stressed all the time. I'll sleep when I die. And then I was like, oh, wait, I've made it so, not I've made it, but it felt like dying might come quicker because I'm not sleeping and I'm not resting and I'm not taking care of myself. And it led to a huge life change. And then transplant obviously can, for many people, not everyone, but can lead to a huge wake up. And for me, it did sort of like, what is it? Before transplant, I had my bucket list. I was like doing my things. And after transplant, it's like every day is bonus.
Yeah.
I am fully confident I would not be here without that transplant. And what does that look like? And when I had recurrent PSC, I thought, you know what? I'm not done in this community. Like I was pulling away, and for whatever reason, for different beliefs that might come differently, but I was drawn back. And so I've kind of fully embraced that and said, where can I be useful to myself and others? And how do we, in a world right now that's in so much tumult and change and asking the big questions, how do we reimagine things? So like I ask that question a lot, right? How do I fundamentally do something different in my life, in my health, in my parenting, in my community? And that's my question every day. How do I re-examine everything and live more connected? I'm so grateful to the work of PSC Partners, not just the day to day communicating with organizations, with medical organizations, with governmental organizations, right, to really put this on the table and be a reminder, right? We're here, we're here, we're here. But also creating a sense in us as patients that, of course, we'd be advocates. Of course, we'd be informed. Like,
Yes.
And I don't know that anyone has directly said that. PSC Partners has made this community incredibly well-informed and vocal, and the not, I don't even want to say push, but encouragement for us to tell our stories, I think also has contributed to this, right? Because when they call on us to say, hey, we need the support on this company or this NIH or the FDA wants to hear from you, right? Because of that inviting of story, we're like ready. We're like, yes, we want to tell our story, right? Because for years, I feel like that's been cultivated in me.
Yes.
When the first time I went to a PSC conference, I cried putting on my name tag because for the first time I was saying I'm sick publicly. So for 5 years, I had not said that publicly. And all of a sudden there was this dot on my name tag. And that was very emotional for me, and clearly I've come a long way since then. But that work and the hope that work has brought and the tireless efforts of the few volunteers that are in it day after day. I mean, I just want to, from the patient perspective, say thank you.
Monica, I'm so grateful for your time and for your service.
And I'm grateful for you and the effort you put into this podcast. And please don't cut this part out, the part where I'm thanking you for your time and effort.
Today we talked about the long-term prognosis and recurrence of primary sclerosing cholangitis after liver transplant. We also talked about the rings support theory and the spoons energy theory. And we talked about PSC online and offline support groups. For more information on these topics, please refer to the links posted with this podcast.
Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this week. For more information about PSC and for a list of people and topics we'll be covering in the near future, please go to www.pscpartners.org. That's www.pscpartners.org. PSC Partners is a non-profit organisation dedicated to providing education and support to primary sclerosing cholangitis patients. There is information and resources on the website. There is a conference once a year. There is a private Facebook group that you can also join. Also, please join our patient registry. This is an anonymous database that provides research support to the medical community who are researching this disease. Thank you very much for listening.